The nightmare started long before Phase 1. So what does the childhood of the Sprunki have to do with it? The world of Incredibox Sprunki looks vibrant, colorful, and welcoming during Phase 1. But as soon as you activate Black's icon, you're thrown into Phase 2. Here, most Sprunki didn't make it, and those who survived were left scarred for life, battling mental issues. We also know that Sprunki don't get along very well with each other. Finding genuine friendships among them is rare. For example, Ratty and Lime started their feud way before Phase 2. But was their childhood just as grim? And did it really shape the way they act now? Sometimes I'll refer to their childhood as Phase 0 to make everything fit chronologically. Here's a fun fact. When a new Sprunki is about to appear, the mannequin glows slightly and even smiles. Orin, like all the other Sprunki, makes the same sounds as in Phase 1. As a kid, Orin looked almost identical to his adult self. Just younger, cuter, and way happier. Ratty, on the other hand, is much more intriguing. As a child, his horns were bigger, his teeth sharper, and that intense, hateful glare was already present in Phase 0. Ratty was always that Sprunki who respected no one and despised everyone. Even though his appearance became slightly less intimidating with age, imagine if he'd grown up looking just like his childhood self. His personality only got worse. This trajectory was predictable long before Phase 1 or 2 ever came around. Kluker hasn't really changed at all, except as a kid, his body looked way too small compared to the symbol on his head. Fun fact, the symbol hasn't changed one bit and is actually fused with his body. Funbot, on the other hand, had a fascinating feature as a child, a digital heart displayed on a small screen. This becomes even more interesting when you compare it to adult Funbot, who no longer has that screen. As we know, Garnold, who we'll talk about later, is a cyborg, making Funbot the only true robot in the Incredibox Sprunki universe. And here's the kicker. Every robot in this world has the potential to gain self-awareness. It seems that's exactly what happened to Funbot. As he grew older, he saw more and more of the chaos and horror among the other Sprunki. At some point, he likely destroyed the screen himself, feeling it didn't reflect the harsh reality of the world he lives in. Veneria? She always seemed happy, even in Phase 1. She's one of the few Sprunki who genuinely loves being part of their world. As a kid, her joy was turned up to 11, which makes it even sadder when you remember how her story ends. Gray, though, he hasn't changed a bit inside or out. Even as a child, he was an anxious wreck, panicking at every little thing. That anxiety was just as present in Phase 0 as it is in later phases. Brood has always been a little slow, and that oversized bucket on his head is proof of it. Interestingly, in Phase 1, his bucket is on the right, but as a kid, it was on the left. The bucket itself has also changed shape over time, though that's a minor detail. The key takeaway? Brood was doomed to life with the smallest brain right from the start. Now let's talk about Garnold. As promised, back in his childhood, he had this odd cable attached to him. It seems that at that time, he wasn't fully complete, and his display needed constant charging. By Phase 1, however, Garnold had evolved into a full-fledged cyborg. His appearance in Phase 0 shows that Garnold's fascination with technology started young. And it also makes the introduction of Funbot in this phase completely logical. Clearly, Kluker and Garnold were born with their talents hardwired into them. As for Lime, he's been a complete psycho since childhood, and both his behavior and looks make that loud and clear. In fact, I'd argue he looks objectively better as an adult than he did as a kid. Fun fact, Lime has apparently been a regular patient of psychiatrists since childhood. It's also likely that the deep-seated hatred between Lime and Ratty was sparked in their earliest years. Honestly, I'm surprised Ratty even managed to coexist with the Sprunki for as long as he did, given his personality. It's possible that Ratty's aggressive nature had a negative impact on Lime early on. Officially, we know that Ratty once hit Lime on the head with a hammer. Judging by Lime's already unstable personality as a child, it wouldn't be far-fetched to think this accident happened even before the events of Phase 0. When Sky was a kid, he was hands down one of the cutest Sprunki, but there's this twitch in his eye that's just unsettling. Maybe he was already scared of something back then, and over time, that fear turned him into the grumpy Sprunki we see in Phase 1. As for Sun, honestly, he hasn't changed a bit. There's really nothing to say about him. Derpal looks exactly the same as he does in Phase 1, just smaller and, well, cuter. Now, Mr. Tree is something else. He actually looked more grown up as a kid than in Phase 1. But here's the kicker, his face. In Phase 1, you only see his eyes and mouth, but back in the day, he had a full-on hollow trunk, and you could make out the shape of an actual face in there. It's like maybe once upon a time, there was a regular Sprunki living in that tree. But as time went on, the hollow started closing up, trapping him inside, like some sort of eternal prison. Simon followed in Derpal's footsteps and barely changed at all. Tunner, though, had his hat from way back when, even though it was way too big for him during Phase 0. And judging by his serious little face, this dude was already dreaming of being a sheriff when he was still in diapers. Mr. Fun? Nothing special going on there. He's just like some of the other Sprunki who don't stand out much. Wenda as a kid was absolutely adorable. You'd never guess that she'd grow up to, well, start taking out her fellow Sprunki. And then there's Pinky. Officially, okay, fine. In my opinion, the cutest Sprunki of all during childhood. She's just in a league of her own. Jevin was all about hoodies from the very start. He's been the same calm and collected Sprunki we saw in Phase 1 since day one. Maybe he got into cult practices the moment he could walk. Who knows? And now, let's talk about Black. Back in his childhood, he lived among the other Sprunki and apparently wasn't cooking up any sinister plans to wipe them all out. At least, not yet. His oversized hat is both hilarious and impressive. But what do you think? Was Black a kind-hearted Sprunki back then, or was he already scheming ways to destroy everyone around him? If you pick Black and nothing happens, it makes you wonder, what's the follow-up to their childhood? The truth is pretty straightforward. In Phase 0, all the Sprunki are still kids, and physically, they're just not capable of the horrors we see in Phase 2. The scariest thing about their childhood? Bedtime. Most of the Sprunki just throw on their pajamas and hit the hay. Nothing crazy happens. But there are some exceptions. Brood and Tunner take off their headgear before sleeping. Veneria is the only one who wears an eye mask. And Simon reveals that his ability to transform into a monster has been with him since childhood. Apparently, sleeping with a hoodie isn't very comfy, so Jevin takes his off while Black stands out as the only one who doesn't bother putting on pajamas. And with that, we can wrap things up. Turns out the events that led to the horrifying outcomes in the world of Incredibox Sprunki have been brewing since their earliest days. But what do you think about the Sprunki's childhood? Or as we've called it, Phase 0. Did it really shape their future? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And now it's time to say goodbye. See you later.